En la industria, es una persona que ha pasado por todos los estados del desarrollo de videojuegos, trabajando como productor, trabajando como diseñador, ha tenido empresas propias, ha trabajado en empresas como Bioware, Sony Arts, ha trabajado en el lanzamiento de productos internacionales y tiene una nueva aventura que es el lanzamiento de un juego multijugador masivo. Así que se puede decir que ha vivido y ha trabajado toda la evolución de los videojuegos desde los años 70 hasta la actualidad. Así que, bueno, quiero que por favor le demos un fuerte abrazo.
Even though I'm from Texas, my Spanish is minuscule, very small. Today I'm going to talk to you about my journey through making games. And what I'm most looking forward to is your questions at the end of the presentation. So I will go quickly so that you can get more questions in. I'm Gordon Walton, and this year I've been making games 40 years, 40, so a long time. And this is a small sample of some of the games I've made along the way. Before I made games, I was a normal person, like you, and I did many things. But one day I decided I must make games rather than do many other things I could have done. So I started making games in the 1970s when the very first personal computers appeared. So, how many people Apple II? Anybody? Oh, you're all too young. And at that time it was all cassette-based or cartridges. And how did we build them? Almost all of them were built by independents, just like most people here. There was nobody funding them but yourself. And they were built by very small teams. One person, two people, one of those people. Sometimes Chris. There were many publishers who did not build games themselves. And very few big publishers at the time. So I worked on some games for the PET 2001, which was one of the early computers. That's me when I'm very young, making games for cassettes. Then the 1980s came, and suddenly we had many personal computers, many kinds of personal computers, and the beginnings of real console computers. So suddenly, if you had to make a game, you had to make it on many platforms at the same time. How did they get built? Games started to be funded by publishers. But still, most games were made by individuals, by people doing it on their own money and their own time. There were many, many, many publishers, hundreds of publishers. So suddenly you had many places to sell your game to. Teams got bigger, 1 to 10 people. 10 people was a big team. I had a 10-person team in the 1980s. Who was making games with me. But typically we would make 2 games for those 10 people, not 1 game. I got to work on a lot of games in the 1980s, mostly Macintosh, Apple games, but many PC games, Amiga, Atari ST, all the 16-bit platforms. The 1990s came and we saw the first big console generations. So PlayStation original, 100 million plus sales. So suddenly many games could be made and put out to tens of millions of people rather than 1 million people used to be a big seller. Now suddenly 5 million people became a big seller. And we were moving from floppy disk to CD-ROM at the same time. And the first handheld consoles, the Game Boy Color came along. So, 1990s, most games were funded by publishers, not by individuals, because they were too expensive. They suddenly cost more money because they took more people. Teams got as big as 40, 45 people. And very few games could be made with just a couple of people, mostly PC games, and a little bit on the handheld side could be made with very few people. Publishers started to consolidate, meaning there were fewer publishers by the end of the 1990s than there were at the beginning by a lot. What did I get to work on? In the 1990s, I worked at two major publishers, Konami, and I worked at a publisher called GameTech. At Konami, I did about 50 games while I was there for only 2.5 years. And at GameTech, I did over 100 games in the space of 2 years. So as a publisher, you touch many games. You don't get to do the actual coding, but you fund the games and you work with the teams to get them done. At the end of the 1990s, I was at Origin working on Ultima Online, which was awesome. The 2000s came, and suddenly we have fewer consoles. The consoles have consolidated down to just a few consoles. And the delivery medium started to pick up on the internet. It's just starting in the 2004 timeframe. And we also suddenly have feature phone, not the new phones, but feature phones, phones that you can finally play games on. Started a new medium where you could suddenly build a game with, again, with very few people. This period, very few independent games. Very few independent teams could get distribution or find a publisher. So it was hard to be a game developer in the early 2000s because you had no access to distribution. And at the same time, the budget market had suddenly disappeared, the low-end market, so there wasn't people buying those games. They were recycling old games. I got to work on some big games during this time period. I continued to work on Ultima. I worked on The Sims Online. I moved to Sony, and I did for a few weeks Ultima Online 2 before it got canceled. And then I moved to Sony, and I worked on Star Wars Galaxies and for a few months on Planet Sun while I was at Sony Online. And you can see, oh, and I finally had children. But then the second half of the 2000s came, and again, we have very few consoles, but suddenly we have the new phones, and the phones become a major market. And online, through Facebook and through regular online, suddenly become a big market too. So DVD and internet are the two major ways the games are delivered. And suddenly you have big companies building games, and you have new small teams building games again, which we hadn't seen for about 10 or 15 years. There's suddenly one person, 2 people, 3 people can build a game and make money and actually ship it, particularly in social gaming and iPhone gaming. But the big games get really big. Hundreds of people working on games. My last team had 550 people building Star Wars: The Old Republic. So I worked on mostly Star Wars: The Old Republic during this time period. The game took 7 years to build. So a long time. Now the period we're in today, we're in the 2010s. Again, whoop. So very few platforms. One Xbox, really 2 Xboxes overlap in this period. The Wii finally shows up, the Wii U. But we're sitting here with very few platforms to work on, except for PC, of course. And again, games get, on the big side, they get bigger. 600-person teams, you see. But on the small side, one-person team can make a game and do well with it, but it's hard to find the customers. But there are so few publishers now. There's only about a dozen major publishers and a few dozen mid-range publishers to go to. So that's a challenge for funding. And what have I worked on? I finished working on The Old Republic. I worked at Disney for 2 years, working on social games and played them. And I've worked on Profile, my own game, at my own small company. So what's going on right now? One, today, you're in the right place at the right time. Because today it's easier to make games than it's ever been. The tools are there, the know-how is on the internet. If you can find friends, you can build a game. Who have talent, you can build a game. But at the same time, it's harder than ever to sell games. Why? Because there's so many games. I think the last number I saw, every day on the iPhone store, on the iTunes store, over 200 games get shipped every day, which means most people don't hear about the good games that get shipped even on a daily basis. It's very hard to get noticed. And if you're going to succeed in our business, you either work for a big company or you need to learn a lot about business to succeed. You have to learn how to raise money. You have to learn how to market. You have to learn how to run your business. All those are harder, just as hard as making games is. So it requires a lot of skill that you used to not have. But again, it's easier to find out about those skills than it's ever been before. Or to reach people who have those skills who are not you to join your team. So if you think about this arc, every time there's new hardware or new distribution, there's a new opportunity for game makers. You can we're right at the point where a new set of consoles are going to come, and perhaps a new set of phones. And when they come out, and maybe the AR, VR, when that stuff comes out and gets established, there's new opportunity for game makers. Every time the hardware is disrupted, the game makers have a new chance to break into the market. You have to be ready to change too. You have to be ready to learn new things all the time. But the main thing is to enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, you probably shouldn't be making games. So I really want to hear from you, your questions. Hopefully someone will help me translate so I can do this correctly for you. And my apologies for the English presentation. And my contact information is here. And I have business cards for anybody who wants them. You can contact me anytime. And I'm happy to help anybody try to make games. So please ask questions.
Hi, thanks for sharing your experience. It's very interesting to know some more insight of someone who has a great deal of experience in this market. And I would like to know which is your happiest memory in your career?
The most fun I had is probably working on Ultimate Online, because it was the right place at the right time. Great teams that I worked with. Online was new, and so we were learning while we did it, and that was really fun. And we were changing the medium. So when I think of the most fun, it's when I have the most impact on what's going to happen in the future. And so the learning we went through was really the most exciting part of my career, was working on that game at that time.
Thank you.
Easy question. I don't know if jugabilidad, jugability. Well, how do you explain when you play a game? You say, yes, this is a good game. One more play.
So you want to know how the magic works?
Yes, all the people say, en español es jugabilidad, es playability. But there's a easy game, but one more play. Do you see this when you make a game? This play is one more play, or this play is not good?
Well, what's the right way to answer this? When I go to build a new game, the first thing I'm thinking of is how do I make the game must play? Meaning that it's different enough that when people play, they will tell their friends that I had a different new experience playing it so that other people will also play it. Because across my entire career, over the entire time, the learning was that most sales of games come from word of mouth, come from players telling other players that this was a good game. Not from marketing. It comes from players. So I'm always thinking, how do I make a game that is must play because it's delivering something new and unique to the players. Secondarily, I want the moment-to-moment play to be compelling to where I do want to play again, and immersive, meaning I get lost in the experience of the game. I forget the world and I'm in the game. That's very difficult for professional game makers because we're always analyzing our own game, we're analyzing other people's games. But for game players, I'm looking for a game that will bring them in and not let them go. So they forget about the rest of the world while they're in the fantasy of the game, or in the moment-to-moment action of the game, if it's not a fantasy. So, and that's magic. It's not a formula. It's every game has a different magic or alchemy that you use to find that formula. And it's not a formula, it's really experimentation. You iterate to make the game more compelling. So I wish I had a simple answer, but there's no simple answer to this.
But you speak about a new experience, but in your presentation, in your PowerPoint, you make games like NASCAR or about sports, or about Star Wars. Mm-hmm. How do you focus a different game that the same sports?
Well, I think that, so a licensed game, whether it's Star Wars or National Football League or NASCAR or Grand Prix, it doesn't matter almost what the license is. What matters is what are the customer's expectations of that license and what constraints does that license put on the game that it will make. Quite often the constraints, you can only do certain things, actually lead to better creativity about what to give the customers. And the licensor will sometimes stop you from being creative, right? It's very difficult. But they also want to make money, which means they want it to be good and new and fresh. So licenses are very challenging for most people because they do constrain you so much. But it doesn't mean that they're not worth doing. Like today I'm doing an original game, but 5 years ago I was working on Star Wars, right? And I worked on Sar Wars twice, like 12 years of Star Wars. So I'm all Star Wars now, for now.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Gordon.
Howdy.
Thank you very much for your nice presentation and for all these years of hard work and interesting games. However, I'm going to challenge you. I would like you to bring out your crystal ball because my questions are regarding
This one, I do have, not
regarding,
here.
regarding the future. We have seen different devices, different platforms you have worked for. I have two questions. My first question is, what's next? What kind of different platform or device can you imagine that players will use in the future? And second question is, they say that there are books written already by computers. Can you imagine games created by computers, so we will be all fired and we have to find a new job? Thank you.
Well, next platforms, if I knew, I could be much more wealthy, what they were going to be. But I think that, well, where game development sits is in a place which is an intersection between consumer tech, consumer high tech, and consumer taste. So consumers' taste or what they like is changing all the time, and consumer high tech is changing all the time. So we have to be at the center of both, and they're both changing at different rates, and the consumer high tech changes in jumps. So when a new platform comes out, there's a jump, where suddenly people go, is this going to be a popular platform? You know, is the Vive going to be the platform? Is the Oculus going to be the platform? Until that there's a winner or enough installed base, it's hard to make software because it's expensive to make software. So you have to kind of watch the market and look for where the biggest market is so you can afford to make really good software for a lot of people. And then you have to figure out, what do a lot of people want as a fantasy fulfillment or as something to spend their time on, which is the other part. Can software one day write software? Yes. Do I think that they're going to be able to predict both of those things well in the near future? No, not in my lifetime. Maybe in yours, but not in my lifetime. No. Go ahead. Did you have another? Was that good?
Why did you decide to start in the video games world? Why did you decide to start in the video games world?
I couldn't quite make that out, I'm sorry.
Why did you decide to start in the video games world?
Why did I decide to start in video games? Oh, I didn't want a real job.
Yes.
I didn't want a real job. When I graduated from college, I was already making video games while I was in college for money. But when I graduated from college, I actually went and got a real job, making real software, and realized that I wasn't having any fun making real software, and thought, if I can make enough money not making real software, making games, that'll be awesome. So it was mostly rebellion or foolishness that made me start making games. Because I could have had, a profitable career making software that wasn't games. But I really wanted to do something that was creative and something that was a little bit rebellious. And that's why I started making games. Thank you.
I want to know how was your experience with Ultima Online? If you said that was one of the most experience for you. How was the evolution of the game for you, and what is this game in your life?
Well, In 1995, I started working for Kesmai Corporation, which was a early online company. So Kesmai had been making online games since 1982 on CompuServe and Genie, the old online services before there was an internet. So I learned how to make online games at Kesmai, and I was intrigued. So I'd already made games for 17 years before I started working at Kesmai. And it reinvigorated my excitement for making games, mostly because we didn't understand how to make games for lots of people who were connected together. And so that was really exciting to me because we didn't know the rules. I knew the rules of how to make a standalone game and how to be successful. But I didn't know how to make online games and be successful, and nobody else did either. So it was awesome that it was discovery. I was discovering as we were doing stuff. And Ultima Online, when I went there, was the biggest online game in the world at the time. And so we were learning new things all the time from that scale, from that larger scale. And when EverQuest got even bigger, we learned things. Later, when World of Warcraft got even bigger, there was learning that happened. Because you put more people together, different things happen. So I loved being at the edge of discovery all the time. That's what made the Ultima Online experience so wonderful for me. Plus, great team. Had great team members who were helping me.
Well, I wanted to ask, while you were working with Kojima, with Konami, did you form part of the Metal Gear Solid development?
No. I worked for Konami of America, so most of the Japanese games came over to be localized and shipped in the United States. So I didn't ever work directly with Kojima. I did go over to Japan several times and met the management staff, but they wouldn't let us talk to the developers at the time. They were keeping them in a locked room almost all the time at Konami. I did enjoy working at Konami because it was my second time working with the Japanese. I had worked for a Japanese company right before going to Konami. And my Konami experience was wonderful in the sense that I learned how to work well with a Japanese company.
Yeah, well, working with EA and BioWare, developing the Star Wars The Old Republic, how was your experience there?
Painful.
Yeah.
Well, it took a long time. It was a co-development with LucasArts. Not that they did the development, but they directed the development in a lot of ways. So it's just, when you make a really big game with lots of people, it's very difficult to keep everybody moving in the right direction together. So the bigger the team, the harder it is to make progress fast, right? Because many people need to be coordinated. So it was a very painful development cycle, just because it took so long and the game was so big. It was wonderful working for BioWare, but when you make big games, they take a long time, and that's not fun. You want to get them out. You want them to ship and be awesome. But it took a long time. It took over 7 years, which is a lifetime of games.
Hello. I have two questions for you. The first is that how can I make a good story or to create a good world by traveling?
I'm not sure I caught your question.
How can I make an interesting story or a good story?
An interesting story? It depends, right? You have to find that the audience wants it, which is hard sometimes. You make a story in your head, right? And then you hope many other people like it. Most of what we do is we test stories. We test everything that we do in games with real consumers to find out if it's working on the bigger games. On small games, you have to have your own group of people that you use as a sounding board or a group that you can get opinions from while you're building the stuff. Because without other people, you don't know, right? You don't know if it's working.
The second question is that nowadays, do you recommend to work in bigger company or to create your own project?
Well, they're both different, if I understand your question. Because I've worked in big companies and I've done, this is my fourth game company. That's my only game company, four times I've done that. And I've worked for many, probably 8 or 9 big companies, or medium companies. It's just different. If you have somebody doing the company, then you can focus on making the game. If you're making your own company, you have to focus on the company and the game. So I get to do this much game and about this much company right now, which is not as fun, but the fun of seeing the game done is what I'm interested in now. I'm interested in creating teams that can succeed making games. Because I've made most of the games I really wanted to make, I've already made them. I have a couple I still like to make, but right now I'm more interested in making an environment for my game developers to be successful.
Good afternoon. Congratulations for your presentation. As American, you know how to make money. I mean, you have.
I hope so.
Yeah, you have the business in your ADN. So, what would you recommend to a person who wants to start a company of video games here in Spain?
I would say study making a company as hard as you study making games. Because it's just another set of rules and set of things you need to learn to be successful at it. Just like making games has a set of rules and a set of learning that you have to do. And it's hard because most people, if you really want to make a game, you don't want to spend time thinking about a company. The other thing to do is to find somebody who you know and trust, who is more interested in making a company than making a game, and work together. Because if you can find that person, that's really powerful if you work together. If it doesn't, if it's a bad marriage though, then it's terrible, right? Because you're going to end up getting divorced. So it's difficult because you really have to trust that person like a marriage partner to make it work. So, my partner and I, my partner is more game and I'm more business now. Could I do the game? Could I do what he does? Yes. But we're better together because I focus on the business so he can focus on the game.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. There's a couple people up there.
Good afternoon. I would like to make you a question. I have been playing games for 30 years.
My condolences. I'm very sorry for you. You're starting to look like me.
Yes. When I began, I had a hair. Now I don't have hair.
First it was white, then it went away. Yes.
Okay. I want to ask you a thing about the player's imagination. When you play a game in the 18th and the... when you play a new game, for example, Uncharted, let's compare with, for example, Pitfall. When you play Pitfall, you have to use your imagination. And in Uncharted, you only have to see what the game show you. For example, in Pitfall you have pixels, and you think this is a temple. And in Uncharted, you see the temple, the mountain, the waterfalls. Do you think new games are killing players' imagination?
I think the player imagination is critical to making games because when I worked with Will Wright, we often talked about It's all about the player model of the game in their head. So the player plays your game, and they build a model in their head about how the game works, how the game world works. And your goal as a game designer is to make that model as apparent to the player as possible, while still surprising them a little bit and adding new stuff along the way, so that their idea of the model of the game is constantly getting a little bigger, you know, in their head, and it's getting larger and more interesting to them over time. So using the player imagination is critical to game design, if that was your question.
Yeah.
And the pacing of how you do that is really critical too. You know, making games is a very psychological mission, right? You're trying to get your head inside of the player's head based on the player doesn't know how you made the game. All they know is the game that they see. So you want to be thinking about how do they see my game right now? How are they going to see it in 5 minutes? How are they going to see it in 30 minutes? And how am I going to give them that vision by what I'm putting in front of them? And when I made social games for a couple of years for Disney. And in social games, it's almost a science, right? Every click that the player makes in the game, every time they do an action, you can measure and see when people like drop out. So you know exactly where the game is not interesting or fun, because people will leave if it's not interesting or fun. It almost tries to be scientific, but truthfully it's about engagement. Are they engaged moment by moment in the game? You can see it easier in those kind of games than some of the other kinds of games that we make. But our goal is always to keep the player engaged, interested, and always wanting to click the next thing and find out what's going to happen next in the game.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Walton, for your presentation. It was very interesting. And my question is, can you tell us what is the game that you are working now and its name?
Oh, I'm sorry. I should be promoting my own game, shouldn't I? Crowfall is the name of the game. And in fact, next week, our website will be in Spanish and the game will be in Spanish next week. It was supposed to happen this week, and of course it's late, like everything when you make games. Everything in games is late because it takes too much interest. Crowfall.com. It's easy to find. We're the only Crowfall thing. We're way up there.
Hi. Yes. Well, congratulations for your talk. It was very inspirational. And well, as far as I'm concerned, you've worked with a lot of people, a lot of different companies, and of course, I'm sure that's great. You must have gained a lot of different skills. You must know how to code in almost every language there is. But also, when answering another question, you've already said that you have already made all the games you wanted to make.
Almost.
Not quite. Okay, so my actual question for you is, what do you think is best? To work kind of like a solitary wolf with different companies? Well, I think that's the feeling I've got about the work you've done in the past, or to get established with a company, a team that you know best, whether it's yours or it's not. But what do you think it's best, to work alone with everyone, or just work for your team, doing the stuff you want to make?
All right, well, a lot of questions actually. Answering that. First is, when I say I've made most of the games, almost all the games I wanted to make, who in here makes games? Right? So some of and some of you are thinking about it. When you make games, there's some games that you have in your head that you have to make to get rid of them, right? You have to make them because you've had an idea in your head that you just got to make. So I'm almost out of those ideas, right? Where I had a game that I just had to make. Doesn't mean I still don't enjoy making games, but I don't have those burning, the burning game that I have to make one way or the other. I got to make those games along my journey. Is it better to work by yourself? Is it better to work with one team? Is it better to work with one company? Well, here's the truth, right? The game business is very volatile, very changing. It changes all the time. So many of the companies that I've worked for, I thought, this is the last game job I'll ever have. I love this company. I want to stay here forever. But, things change around you. So it doesn't mean that you're going to get to stay where you think you're going to do your best work. Because the company itself will change, or the company will go out of business, and then you have to do something different. So your journey, some of it you can drive, and some of it will be driven by external events. Things happen, and you have to suddenly change your course because something has happened that you can't avoid. So I have both the fortune and misfortune to not hold a steady job. So I've worked with a lot of companies, which means I've worked with a lot of great people on a lot of great projects. But in many ways, I wish I'd worked on fewer projects at fewer places, because I would have made a bigger contribution potentially at those places. But I think every person has their own desires first, and then what life is going to give you, which you don't know what life is going to give you when you least expect it. And so when I ran my own game companies very early in the game business, I never thought I would work for a big company. I thought I would always work for myself. Then I started working for big companies, and I thought, in 10 years I'll start another company. It took 20 years for me to start another company, not 10, because I was having too much fun working at the big companies. So you never know. You don't really know what life is going to give you. And the best thing is to not, in my mind, is to not be too married to one path. Because then, if you're disappointed in that, it may be very devastating. More to be flexible and ready when something new happens, make new decisions about your life and about what you want to have. Also, you will, as you reach mastery, so I was a programmer, right? For a long time. I was a programmer and a game director. And one day I said, I either have to program or I have to game direct. And I chose to stop programming and just direct games. Because I was either going to be okay at both or really good at one. So I had to choose one. And as I mastered that, then you have to say, oh, but now there's a new platform. You have to remaster. You have to learn again. You're going to learn through your whole career as the world changes around you. So that I don't know if I really answered all your questions.
Yeah, I think you have to admit that was a really great advice. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Who's got the other mic?
Good evening. Thanks for your presentation. Can you tell us any advice for people like me who wants to taking up this work at the developer games?
So what do you want to do? I'm sorry?
Any advice?
Say again.
Advice for beginning this work.
Somebody help me, because I can't quite make you out from here. What does he say? Oh, for somebody that's just starting? So here's the beautiful thing about making games. All you have to do to make games, to learn how to make games, is start making games. Yes, there are educational programs that will help you with that, but the truth is you learn making games by doing it, just like you get better at playing games by playing games. You get better at making games just by making games. Make simple games. Don't try to make your dream game first time out, because you'll be very disappointed, right? But you have to start making small games, make bigger games. My first I was lucky that the first game I built did eventually get published, but I probably made, in the time that I published 4 games between 1977 and 1980, I probably made 10 games, but I only got 4 of them published. But I was learning to make games by making other games, and some of them were publishable, and some of them were not. But I had to make them to learn more. So it's easy to get better at this. Just start making games. Whatever you know how to do, great. Then find other people to help you do the things you don't know how to do. And there are so many people now and an internet to get connected on where you can find people to help you make a game. Because they want to make a game too. And they may know how to do art, or maybe you know how to do programming. Or you know how to do design. Now you have to find a programmer or an artist and you can make a game. Or you can make terrible art, like we used to do. For a long time we made our own art, and it was terrible.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Hi, Gordon. My question is that, I want in the future, I want to make a video game. So my question is that it's better study software engineering than the informatic engineering, and after that do a master of make video games.
All right, so you studied, and the last part of your question.
That it's better study software engineering than informatic engineering for make a video game.
I'm not sure I understand, but I think you can study. The studying helps, right? Nowadays there's so much information, right, that you can actually get a head start or a leg up, is what we call it in the States, by having that extra education. But again, most of it is just doing it, just trying it. Again, make the simplest game you can, and then make a more complicated one, and a more complicated one, until you can get to the game that you really want to make. So, I made very simple games in the beginning because I didn't know how to make more complicated games. I only know how to make a very simple game with my programming skills. But as I made my 3rd or 4th game, I could make a more complicated game. I could make a bigger game. I could make a more interesting game because I was getting feedback on my earlier games going, oh yeah, that wasn't as fun as I thought it would be. Maybe I should do it this way to make it more fun. And that feedback from customers is so important to the process. And it doesn't just need to be customers. It can be your friends who are honest with you, right? Your non-honest friends will tell you it's great even when it's terrible, right? But your honest friends will say, no, that sucked. You need to work on it. You need to make it better. And they will help you make better games before you put it out for the whole world to see.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi.
Yes. Thank you for raising your hand.
I want to say hi and thank you to be here. And I have 2 questions. The first one is you can talk a bit more about profile. You're working right now. You can talk a bit more.
So the profile of what I'm working on right now?
See, you can talk a bit more.
Yeah. Well, so since 1995, so for 22 years, I've made online games, massively multiplayer online games, and I'm working on a massively multiplayer online game. My partner did a game called Shadow Bane a long time ago. More recently, did Wizard 101, which a lot of kids know because it's a kids game. We discussed when we made our partnership, we wanted to make a new online game, and we were looking for the hole in the market, the customers who were the least satisfied with the current offerings, including World of Warcraft. And those customers were hardcore PvP players. So we looked for the market first, and then we decided to make a game for that market. That's the difference between a new game maker and an old game maker. An old game maker like me, we go, are there going to be customers? And can we find a great game for those customers that we also want to make? And so we actually looked for customers first, and then decided on exactly what kind of game we were going to make for those customers.
My last question is, as a executive producer, your positioning the team. What are you doing as a CTV producer? What is your work? Good job.
Ask that one more time, a little different.
You are working as executive producer, right?
Yes.
What are you doing? What is the
Oh, I do as little as possible. I'm very lazy. But in seriousness, what does an executive producer do? They mostly think about the brand and the business around the brand. So a producer works on making the game better. I'm working on making the brand work. Meaning that I'm concerned about, are we hitting the right market with the thing? Do we have the right business model? Are we licensing the right stuff? Or is all the business stuff around this game title going to work? I get involved in the game too, a little bit, but mostly I leave that to the people who are building the game because I want them to do their best work. And if I go tell them how to do it, then I'm really the creative director, not the executive producer. So an executive producer is really more of a business person than a game maker per se. So I'm the boring business guy for the most part at this point.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We're not running over, are we? Time-wise? Are we good time-wise? One more question?
It's me again.
Yeah.
So regarding the marketing, where you are more or less focused, you already explained how social games are able really quickly to adapt themselves to the customer preferences. But how do you test, from a pure marketing point of view, how do you test games, classic games, before releasing it to the market?
So marketing is an interesting part of our business, right? So we're in the new marketing part. So we have very unusual market. So nowadays more markets have connected customers than before. But originally only massively multiplayer games had customers that we purposely put together to talk to each other. So we were the leaders in connected audience marketing. And so our learning, or at least my learning through that, is really what I'm trying to do is make customers happy, because happy customers talk to each other about happy things. Unhappy customers, if they can talk together, talk about unhappy things a lot, and then make less customers show up. So in our business, traditional marketing is maybe this important, and kind of the community work is really, really important. So in marketing our game, we mostly went directly to communities that we were targeting specifically because we knew they would like our kind of game, and work on the influencers, the key people in those communities, not the influencers like YouTube and Twitch, because Twitch was nothing when we started. Now it's gigantic, right? It's awesome. But trying to get people who really care about the kind of game that we're making, who are leaders in their communities, get them involved first. So when we launch our game finally, we won't do a traditional, I'm going to spend $1 million on ads and stuff. What I'll do is I'll do more performance-based marketing. So if we sell it, then they will get paid kind of marketing rather than just buying ads and hoping it works. Because we don't really want to be a traditional company. We're very contrarian about how we do everything. We don't follow traditional wisdom at all with most of what we do, because we're in a different business. We're in a connected community business. And so that makes it very different. If I'm doing Candy Crush, people who play Candy Crush don't talk to each other that much. Most of them play it alone. They might talk to somebody they know in real life occasionally about it, but they don't come together as a community and talk about the game as a group. And in our games, they do. They come together as a community and talk. So I have to be managing the community more than I'm just marketing. Yeah. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for putting up with my English. Thank you. And don't forget to grab a card if you want one, but all my contact information's up there too. I'm happy to talk to any game maker anytime if I can.